Welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish. I'm your host, Juliet Clark, and today we're going to have one of our authors on. And I predict that when this book comes out in the next 2 weeks, it will be one of our biggest sellers ever. She has a huge audience and also some pretty friends in some pretty high places. But before we get started, I want you to remember to go over, if you haven't already, and get your free subscription to Breakthrough Author Magazine. Lots of tips, tricks. You can find that at breakthroughauthormagazine.com. Also, after you hit that button to subscribe, it'll take you to a short quiz. I encourage you to take it and make sure that all of those pieces you need to have integrated and in place and a plan for are in place and ready to go before you publish your book. Also, if you're somebody who likes to watch this on video instead of listening to it on podcast or going over to our website and reading the blog, you can find us over on YouTube at Superbrand Publishing. Please subscribe. The more subscribers, the better. Well, today's guest is Lesley Michaels, and she was born to be a feminist. Her foundational ethos was shaped by her audacious paternal grandmother, who was a first-wave feminist and a savvy businesswoman. At age 12, Lesley dreamed of creating a platform for bringing women together in alliance. Making notes about that dream the following morning started her on her path that would inform Lesley's entire life. She came of age just as the second wave of feminism was becoming significant American social movement. At age 16, she struck out on her own for New York City and the heart of the cultural transformation that was the zeitgeist of the late 1960s and early 1970s. She was later one of the first women to break through the glass ceiling in the old boy industry of oil and gas. The ruthless competitiveness of women she encountered in corporate world was shocking and emotionally fracturing. The foreignness of their approach to other women after spending years among committed feminists convinced Lesley to abandon the corporate world. Shortly after, she was infected by a latent entrepreneurial spirit, weren't we all? Over the following years, Lesley developed and sold several small businesses. Ownership gave her the refreshing freedom to choose how the business would be shaped, and in each case, her staff was a multicultural representation of women. During this same period, she became a leader in the coaching industry. Lesley has mentored Fortune 500 C-suite executives, individuals with the financially privileged sector, and celebrities. A lifelong student of human behavior, Lesley observed that the level of distress still experienced by women in corporate hemispheres is causing many to walk away. They are losing their dream, and both industry and the world are losing leaders of tremendous merit. Developing effective solutions to pull back the veil on this dirty little secret ignited Lesley's commitment to On the Shoulders of Mighty Women. Throughout the years that followed her time in New York, Lesley was a dedicated voice for bringing attention to the challenges dehumanization, legalized inequities developed upon members of marginalized communities. Consequently, the additional burden created by the intersectional feminism, as coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, was immediately apparent to Lesley as both a woman and a lesbian. Lesley's body of unique life experiences have provided her with firsthand understanding of the daily struggle faced by women of every race, culture, and sexual orientation. On the Shoulders of Mighty Women is a tribute to the power and grace of those who came before and the ones who will follow, the warriors and the fallen. This book is one more way Lesley found to amplify the voice, energy, and experience-based understandings and compassion of women fighting for equality, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Lesley currently lives in Taos, New Mexico, where she facilitates virtual programs on topics ranging from discover personal freedom through self-trust to building strategic alliances of women. She also hosts a weekly podcast called Women We Should Know. So stay tuned. This is going to be really interesting. And here's Lesley, as promised. So Lesley, I read your bio in advance, so everybody knows what's going on with you. But what really got me about your bio is that you were in New York City in the 80s and not, what was going on in corporate America there. I wanted to start there because I really want women who are going to read this book and to understand that breaking through the glass ceiling back then was like martial arts in a way. You're fighting the system, you're fighting the men, you're fighting everybody.
Yeah, I refer to that as my period of sailing through fences because I was kicked through them so many times.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, I was in New York in the 70s
Oh.
during the period of the push for the Equal Rights Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of the necessity to build a life, I went back to middle America. And that's when I went into corporate oil and gas. And I was it was me. And then there were two other women, but one of them was in a different state, and it was brutal. And even though there weren't women in the company, there were women I had to deal with in other companies. And the men were patronizing and just a pain. But after a while, when my P&Ls were out doing theirs, they kind of just left me alone. Mm-hmm. Where I had a real problem was with the women.
Wow.
The women were vicious and truly undermining, intentionally undermining. And it was exhausting because I came from a life where I was raised by a suffragette. I hitchhiked to New York to be part of the equal rights movement. I came from a feminist sensibility where women come together and you align and you create great things together. And then I go into this corporate structure, and these women were so infused with their own misogyny that it was brutal. That's the word I have for it.
Yeah. And I'm going to share an experience I had male wise, but I can kind of relate that to what the females were going through back then. I'm not going to mention what company, but I was up for a promotion, and they literally walked me into the office when they announced who got the job and said, you know what, you're a beautiful woman. You'll find yourself a rich husband. John over there is engaged and he has to support a family. And I was like, yep. Oh. Mm-hmm. So I can sort of see why women were like that, in the sense that here you are fighting a patriarchy, but there aren't many other women. So it's almost like everyone was the enemy in this. If you wanted to get through that black ceiling or that glass ceiling, you had to be as brutal as the men. And there was just no room for women back there. I think is really what was going on. And we just didn't understand that there was another way.
Right. I do understand that, that it is fear of minimal real estate.
Yeah.
That created that mentality. And I also understand that when we started to see women uplifting other women in business, that was the moment when we saw a big shift. More women were making it through because it was women who were advocating for them. And the women who were advocating for them were key to organizations. They were so brilliant and bringing such important initiatives to the table that they were actually heard. Now, that doesn't mean they were paid as much.
Right.
It just meant they were heard.
Yeah. And it was, from the standpoint of advertising, I traveled with all of the people on my team were men. And I traveled with them. So you can kind of imagine there were lots of stories with that too.
I bet there were lots of stories with that. Yes.
Yeah. Like keeping your male team in line. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that, because once women got a clue that uplifting others, then they weren't there alone. It wasn't that kind of savage, survival mission to do all of this with it. So tell me about like what really possessed you to write the book about this? Because I know you've been teaching courses and you've been doing this for a while. Why did you think now is the time to write this book?
I started everywhere I looked, I started seeing whether it was Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Psychology Today, I started to see a flood of articles and research documents on why are we having this absolute epidemic of woman-to-woman incivility in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And of course, it spoke to me of things I'd seen in every decade throughout my life. And I've seen it grow and I've seen it wane. And at the same time that that was happening, I was having women come to me as clients and they were destroyed. Mm-hmm. They had been chewed up and spit out by the women they were working with. And they had lost a level of faith in themselves, but they had also lost a level of faith in women's ability to find a place in the work, in the higher levels of work, the work realm, the professional realm, because of the viciousness that they were experiencing, and they were gun shy. And so I felt like it's time. It's time. We've got to go to the next level of operating in alliance. And look at where men have gotten with their secret handshake and their old boys club. Mm-hmm. It's time for women to create alliance among themselves and stop looking to the men, to the patriarchy, and not men and patriarchy. I always say them separately because they are different things.
Yes, they are.
Looking to men and looking to the patriarchy to support them, that's not going to happen. Of course, there are some wonderful men. I have great men friends. But let's look at the majority. It's just not, we're just not there yet. So it felt like time to call out and invite women to start creating these alliances, because I truly and sincerely believe in every cell of my being that when women begin to align, we can achieve equity. We are 50.52% of the population. More women are registered to vote than men. More women show up at the polls than men. When women start to align, then we can start to shift this where there is an equality, there is an equity. And what's most important is it doesn't just benefit women.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, and this is sort of what I liked about what happened, was I think it pushed more women into entrepreneurship and owning their own business because they knew there was a better way to lead. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think was it Forbes or Harvard Business Review? I think it was Harvard Business Review, one or the other, just did a long expose over several months about the number of senior women mm-hmm. who are leaving. They are taking their professional collateral that they've spent decades building. They're going out, they're building businesses, they're building nonprofits, they're building all types of things. And to the greatest degree, they're hiring women.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I got fed up with corporate America in my early 40s. So mm-hmm. I think I was way before the curve on that, but I think it's something that's my client base, is those mm-hmm. women who are like, I want their kids are leaving, so they don't have to worry about, they can quit that job, first right. of all, because right. now they don't have a kid in college or, something like that they really have to be aware of. But they're saying, I have all this expertise, I can start a business of my own. Right. And I'm tired. If they're like me, I was tired of the politics. I was tired of the games. I'm a really straightforward person. So for me, that just didn't work anymore.
And I think women are starting to experience a sense of wanting to own something that is theirs, mm-hmm. something they created, to put all of their creativity and their ingenuity into creating something that looks like them, that feels like them, and speaks like them. And it's a very exciting time in that regard.
Yeah, no, I think so as well as that sort of softer, gentler side of business. When I first started my own company, I had to go take some leadership classes and kind of reinvent, because the corporate structures, I think it's changing a lot now because of women. But back when I was
Right.
in it, there was a way you led, and it wasn't pretty.
It was not pretty. No, it wasn't. No. And a lot of women are doing is they are forming collectives where they are supporting each other and bringing out their inherent talents, their inherent empathy, their inherent creativity. And I'm really excited to see what the landscape of business is going to look like in a few years.
Yeah, I am too. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be much better, because there is that empathy that goes along with being a woman, but being tough enough. I think the thing is being tough enough not to get caught up in the drama, not to get caught up in the, political. There's just a lot of stuff there that I think happens in corporate America that you can revise your own business to get rid of a lot of that stuff. And personally, I think that stuff wastes time, effort, and money inside of those corporate America businesses.
Well, there's proof in the numbers. Do you know for the last 3 quarters, and this is during the end of a pandemic, women-owned, women-operated businesses have shown more gains than the traditional and the big corporate businesses.
Really?
Yes,
I didn't
we
know
are
that.
just out there kicking some butt.
Good deal. And you know what I think you can attribute that to partially is that women are relationship builders. I think a lot of men are getting caught up in this click and handshake, and women really get down to it. And relationship building builds trust. So
It does. It does. And that's what one of the things I talk about is the fact that stop trying to do what the men do.
yeah,
There are wonderful studies that I share with women about how women we're not constructed to network because we're not fundamentally transactional. We're relational.
yes.
And so instead of the traditional networking, go out and build relationships with these people you want to do business with, and you'll fly. You will fly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And another thing that is wonderful to me that as I see women taking more real estate, claiming more real estate in the professional market, is that's just a small fraction of who we are. And so it's going to have a trickle down effect. It's going to have an effect on the amount of work we put into the family and what we start demanding of the other people in the family. Okay, I'm out there doing the thing, so you have to pitch in, and not being the sole provider of all emotional support for an entire, whether you have a family of 3 or a family of 30, not being the entire emotional support for all of that.
I'm laughing because I used to have kids sitting around, my house was like the place to gather for the kids. And I would hear one of my kids whining about something, and you could hear me from the kitchen going, life's hard, get over it, move on. What's your next thing? And all the other kids in the room would be like, God, your mom is so mean. But I have very independent, how am I going to get around this obstacle children, because
Yes.
of that resiliency and because of that, how are you going to get around that problem? And I think that's what women do really well, is that thought from raising families and all that about, okay, I've got this problem. How am I going to get around it and get it solved and do everything else? So I think women do that really, really well. And you're right about that. We can also raise children who do that really, really well, which I don't see dads doing. Well, I don't want to diss dads, but I don't think dads do it as well as women do.
On the whole, they don't.
Yeah.
But for years, and even now, women weren't thought to be tough enough to be good negotiators. Think about a woman who's in a shop with a 17-year-old who is determined to wear a prom dress that is cut down to the navel, that her whole life depends on this. Her entire future of her life in her mind depends on this prom dress that is cut down to the navel. And mom has to negotiate with her to get her to buy something else. Women are tough.
Yeah. Mine wasn't the prom dress. It was the booty shorts.
There you go.
There you go.
Exactly.
And I remember my mom's wore with me was the low cut. I came home with a low cut blouse when I went on a trip with grandma in Los Angeles. And grandma thought it was fine. And my mom was literally standing there with her hands on her hips going, Mom, you would have never let me wear that. What are you doing? Like, why are you saying yes and making me say no?
Because it's 25 years later.
Yeah, exactly. And you're not my child, or, you're not wearing
That's
that.
right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Mine was the dresses that were short enough that I had to be careful how I moved.
Oh,
Well, it was the era.
I don't know, Lesley. I'm getting to know you pretty well. Was there underwear with that or not?
Oh, sure. We weren't that bold.
Okay.
We weren't that bold during the mini skirt era, but
yeah. And we didn't have thongs back then either. Just
No,
FYI, we're that old, ladies.
we are that old. We had creepy underwear back then.
Yeah, granny panties.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. So the book.
Yes.
The book is coming out on June 14th. In fact, this will drop the day it goes pretty much into pre-sale or into our bestseller campaign.
Yes.
What would you tell women about why they need this book?
Because unlike most women's books, which I am not disparaging at all, we need all of them. But unlike most women's books, this does not address one issue that women face or another. We have been, as women, we have been so compartmentalized by our lives, by society, by business, by marketers. And so I address women from a variety and a full spectrum of issues we face, from unpaid labor to being the emotional rock for 35 people, to business, and also from the perspective of what is there to gain by moving into alliance? What is there to gain by setting down the swords and setting down the fear of being in alliance because of having been kicked through the fences earlier? Mm-hmm. What can we gain together? And I actually believe it's tremendous.
Yeah. I'm going to have you myth bust something for somebody. You and I had a conversation the other day where you busted a myth of mine. Oh. So I don't know if you remember this conversation. So you older ladies out there, so you're trying to break through this glass ceiling in the 80s. And then we get to the 90s. And I told you that I had disengaged from the feminist movement because of what we called feminazis back then. Bust that for us here. If you're one of those people who is thinking that those were the women and you disengaged, Lesley's about to enlighten you.
I am so glad you brought that up. No, feminazis. First of all, feminazis is a term that was brought up by men.
Yeah, yes, it was. Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Let's start with the fact that was the patriarchy labeling all women who had the audacity to say we deserve equal. And then women picked it up as a reference to other women who were being just brutal. But those women are not feminists.
Right. And that's
those
what I was.
Women are just seething and emanating internalized misogyny. They are vehicles of the patriarchy.
Yes, I was going to say the term was well deserved, but this is what you're busting, is that they were behaving in a way that is not congruent with how we want this to be viewed.
That's right. A feminist is someone who truly believes inequality for everyone. Tiny little piece of data. I won't get real heavy on you ladies, but here we go. In 1871, the 14th Amendment was passed, and it gave all people equal rights, except that back in those days, people meant men. People meant men. Women did not get the vote till 1920, and they were still not given equal equity, equal equality in any level. So feminism is about saying, now wait a minute, we contribute more than half to this society. And we deserve to receive at least equal to our contribution. That's all it is. We deserve to receive equal to our contribution and to be respected for our contribution. It's not about, absolutely not. In fact, most of the feminist organizations around the country now have an arm for men because so many men are becoming involved in uplifting women. It is not about abandoning your kids or, oh, a great myth that was going around in the late 70s is if you're a feminist, you have to be a lesbian. No, it is not a recruiting service.
Wait a minute. Are you saying you get recruited to be a lesbian?
Well, that's a whole different topic, and no.
Okay, good.
But by putting that label on there, they were able to disparage two different groups of women on the whole, plus this subsect of women. And we're not that. We're just women out there saying we deserve equal, and we want that, and we want it now because we want it for our daughters, we want it for our granddaughters. And part of feminism is also understanding that it's not just women that benefit.
Yeah.
A lot of these women that I was speaking of they were CEOs, they were this, they were that, big leaders that have left and are building their own companies. Those who still have children at home, many of them, their husband is retiring and taking care of the kids.
Yeah.
And these husbands are reporting how incredibly fulfilling it is. They did not know everything they were missing. And so not only do the husbands benefit, but the kids now the kids have a real hands-on male role model. So all of that, I know it's a lot, but all of that is feminism, is just being fair.
Yeah. And I agree with that. You and I talked before we got on here about I'm a morning person, and I had a different business before I owned this company, but that was my time in the morning before the kids got up. But then I had that time, I had that hour or two, and the kids got up off to school, and then I went to work until they got off. And I thought it was I grew up with a working mother, and I thought it was so different from the lifestyle that she had, where, when I was a female athlete, my parents never could come to my games because they had to work. I never missed one of my kids' games. I never missed one of those things at school. I had a schedule where I could pretty much do it all. And I can imagine that men love that as well, being able to rearrange everything to do that, because it really is, it's really bonding with your kids as well.
Absolutely. Men are loving it, and they're understanding why we have been talking about unpaid labor for so long, because they're also understanding that although they love it, don't want to change it, it's hard work.
Oh my God, it's hard.
It is hard work.
So Lesley, you probably don't know this. When I quit my last job, my last real job, I won't say with which company it was, I decided to be a stay-at-home mom.
Oh,
at the time,
I'm sorry, I just don't see it, Juliet.
No,
I just don't see it.
It was just hilarious because I got 2 weeks into it and I started my own business. I was like,
I bet.
oh my God, I hate my children. I hated, what I really hated was when we got a nanny, when I started my own business, so I could kind of balance and have the housework done for me and a little bit of help getting the kids ready and picking them up. picking to school in the morning and picking them up, was my poor nanny would come home and say, yeah, the other mothers don't really want anything to do with me. They want to talk to you. And I was like, if I have one more conversation about the color of my child's poop, I'm going to kill them. I mean, and I don't mean to be like shallow and condescending about it, but like I truly it was only 2 weeks and I was dying. So it is hard work. And I don't think, but here's the other part of it. When you talk about this unpaid labor, it pays you in different ways. It's not like, yes, you don't get money, but you get to know your kids really well. You get to know the teachers really well, which I think is really important in today's age, knowing what's going on in the schools. You get to know, sports, you get to do all these things with them that you wouldn't have otherwise. So at the end of the day, you have to think about what's that more important thing. Is it money, which, yeah, we all need, or is it that bonding, which you're never going to get again? Those kids are only going to be small once.
And you survived it for a whole 2 weeks.
I did.
I just got to point that out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's hard. It's really hard. But luckily when I started that business, I was able to structure my time. So I wasn't with them 24/7. Although I do have to say summers were chaos. Yeah. I tried to work, but I don't even like, it's hard with kids at home.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's risk and reward with all of that. And I think sometimes when we talk about that unpaid labor, we don't think of, there are benefits with that are pretty amazing too.
There are benefits with it. However, I've got to push back on that, Juliet.
Oh, yes.
Got to push back on it. What about the women who they are doing all that? There's all the unpaid labor involved. The uber successful husband falls in love with the secretary, and when he leaves, the woman has nothing because maybe he is an attorney or he has great attorneys. So there's a disparity point that we can't continue to overlook.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. When I had my real estate business, we saw that over and over. A house that had to be sold, and
That's right.
A new one bought for a girlfriend, or
right.
The one I loved the most was when I sat down with a soon to be divorced couple with a house that was worth $500,000. And they'd say, we both need 300,000 to start our new lives. Well, good luck with that. Like your house isn't worth that. So there was a lot, but yeah, I do agree with that as well. And I think sometimes, sometimes you get with a controlling spouse too, who wants everything. And it can make I think at the end of the day, how do I say this nicely? Because I was actually not that similar. I was the major breadwinner, but there's this point too, where, people will go outside that. They want what they want so badly that they don't take into consideration, how it's affecting the kids. So, I mean, that's a good reason to be very bonded to your kids. So Lesley, this has been really good. I'm sure you and I will have many, many more conversations about all of this.
We will.
Because we really have diverging views. If you guys haven't figured it out, Lesley's very liberal. I'm pretty conservative. But what I love about our conversations is that I think they're always a conversation. They're never a name calling escapade, right, which I see so much in the world of today. And I feel like there's problems being solved in other sides of a story being seen. And I wish there were more of that going on in the public these days, instead of just all the fighting, because I feel like she and I could solve some really big world problems together.
Oh, we could take it on. And that is what is important about alliances. You're going to have you're going to have liberal, you're going to have conservative, you're going to have independent, you're going to have progressives, you're going to have all of these viewpoints. And if women particularly, who are relationship oriented, can sit down and bring all those perspectives together, mm-hmm, have conversations, and actually hear the other person and be able to say, okay, I hadn't thought of it that way before. That's where solutions come. That's where the big solutions start to be created.
And brokering deals and brokering, the word escapes me, but things that work together. Okay, you're going to have to give up a little. I'm going to have to give a little, but there's something in the middle that works for most people. So
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So where can we find you? Everybody's going to want the book, but where can we find you? And the book will be on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple. It's going to be everywhere, you guys. So you can find it anywhere.
And you can find me at lesliemichaels.com, and that's Lesley. I know that's uncommon spelling in this country, but my mother's English. So it's Lesley Michaels.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing today.
Thanks for having me, Juliet. It was fun talking about booty shorts and plunging necklines.
There you go.